we're excited to finish this one because of the bit
we
at
are
the
like,
end.
it's like, if this is going to be the shortest like main episode ever, because we're too excited to talk about what's happening at the end. It's like, meanings are in people, not words. End. Right. What does this mean? What is truth? That is the teaser for the end. We're going to have a conversation around the meaning of truth. That is at the end. And oh my gosh, we just spent a couple of minutes diving into it. We're like chomping at the bit for it.
We will explain exactly what's happening later on, but you can skip to it if you really need to. But what we're going to talk about is a note that I made that John was like, that's a good point, which is meanings are in people, not words. And for those of you that follow me on social media, you've probably seen me talk about it a little bit before. And I want to give a little bit of background before we carry on. So this was an idea that I've carried through a while, but I've never been able to articulate the actual thing in a couple of words. And I heard this on a podcast from Brett Bartholomew, which is the Art of Coaching podcast. And he focuses on communication and coaching, specifically strength and conditioning coaching, but he does work with all other coaches from business, leadership, etc. So that is where the articulation of this thing came from, just as a bit of background from my side.
I'm just very excited. I'm very excited. I'm just like, ooh, it's gonna be fascinating. So first, why don't we have like, what does meaning mean? So the topic of today is meanings are in people, not words. But I want to ask a question as a kind of prep for this actual kind of thing we're doing later on. What does meaning mean?
Well, I could go and Google define it, but
I've already done that. So here we
okay.
go. So the etymology of the word meaning is sense that which is intended to be expressed. Also an act of remembering, which is a little bit fascinating. I like the act of remembering.
Yes. I mean, that comes into some of the other words that we have on our little list that we're going to go through. But when the reason I like the sentence words are in like meanings are in people, not words, is because a word to one person can mean something completely different to something else, which is essentially what the sentence says. And the reason this bugs me a little bit in the coaching world, when I was in the coaching world, is because you'd have two different coaches. One of them, again, I'm talking sports coaching here, but this could be applied into most contexts, I would imagine. You have a performance coach and you have a participation coach, and you say inclusion. What does inclusion mean? Well, a performance coach, most of the time, win at all costs. If you're bad at the sport, you don't play much in your game, whatever sport it is. Football, you don't get on the pitch because we want to win. Whereas participation, everyone gets the same amount of time. So inclusion, that word inclusion means two different things, even though it's the same word. And from a coaching perspective, that's where I was like, if they've got different meanings for things, we need to add more context, add more specifics around what it is that we're talking about. So in coach education, sports coach education, the word inclusion is now added with, we need more inclusion, which means, okay, inclusion means we need to get more people doing something, which some performance coaches don't like.
I think to bring it into kind of my wheelhouse, it's like we often talk about our businesses and it's that act of like, what do you do? What is it you actually do? And we have these wonderful words. It's like, I'm a productivity coach. I help businesses scale and grow so that they can find, you know, joy in their business, or they can develop this, develop that. And what really hit me was, this is what my coach said to me once, and it stuck with me so hard. It's like, what does that actually mean? What are you trying to actually say with that sentence? Because we have like I help X people do X things so that they can do Y. But often it's such a surface level thing. Freedom, for example, is one that everybody freaking throws out of I want to give you more freedom to do more than you. What do you mean by freedom? What is your flavor of freedom? What is your flavor of those words? Because that's the thing. In business, we say kind of the same thing, but the niche, like this thing we've all got to do, the niching down, niche or niche if you can't speak English.
I don't know. I don't know which one's which anymore.
I always say niche because I'm in the UK and that's how you say it. Niche just sounds weird.
I say niche as well, but niche is just
you just
I just hear niche more. It's like, okay,
Americans, and
more of them.
Yeah, for better or for worse, depending on your
I was
viewpoint.
gonna say, be political there, sit on the fence.
Yeah. How boring is that? But yeah, it's like when you can dive into that word and understand what your meaning of the words you're using when you're promoting yourself, when you're talking about what you do, that's where your niche is. When you understand your definition, like what freedom means to you, what like more time means to you, what flexibility means for you, because they all mean different things to different people. Then when you shift on to even more deeper, if we talk about the productivity space, you have the standard definitions of like projects, tasks. What the fuck does that actually mean?
You had to confirm in your head, like, can I swear? Can I swear? Yes, I can.
Yeah, I just mark them all as explicit now because it's much easier. We swear, get over it. What does a project mean? What does a task mean? And often we go, well, a project, I don't, it's just this. Okay, does that what you and when I coach people in their productivity, in their systems, it's like, what does that actually mean for you? Because often it's completely different what it means to me. Because that's really important because, as I go on my soapbox every single frickin' time, productivity in business is personal. That's what it is. And if you don't understand what these words mean to you, goals is another one. I hate the traditional term of goals, as we've done a whole episode on in the last season of how much I hate goals. But there are other things that I view as a goal, but the perception is different. It doesn't necessarily mean I like goals. I just hate the public facing overall view of what a goal is.
What other people's meaning of a goal is, because I mean, what you said there were so many points. I was like, I want to talk, but I was like, no, keep stum. When it comes to you said personal meaning of something, and when it comes to our personal meanings and thoughts and ideas around something, obviously it's going to be impacted by our biases, and we all have bias isn't a bad word, we all have them. It just means that it's impacting what we think, how we think, and we have filters in what we look at, why we look at things, and filters normally are shaped by past experiences. Past experiences obviously impact our bias as well. So the meaning of a word, the meaning of a term or anything like that is therefore shaped by past experiences, perceived past experiences as well, because there is the difference. You can have been in a situation where you perceived a threat that there wasn't actually a threat, but you thought there was, and then in your memory, in your head, you're like, oh, that's dangerous, I shouldn't do that. But you only perceive the threat because of potentially a narrative someone else has built, which actually links to one of the videos that I did recently, because you perceive a threat that isn't necessarily there, and it can shape your meaning or your understanding of a topic or an area, which therefore suggests that you want to understand the word for you, what it means for you, the narrative that you have around that thing.
And it's like we talk about hacks and tips and tricks in this space. Here is the best ever hack. Understand yourself. If you understand yourself, yeah, I know. I did that. If you know what things mean to you, everything has better context, because context is really important. That's another word we need to add to the list. Context. Context is really important because it's our own personal, like private. I'm now looking at I had etymology online up when doing the other thing because I wanted to dive into etymology of our word today, and I can't help myself. And so I looked up personal, private, pertaining to the self, late 14th century. There you go. Look at that.
You use Google, you cheat.
I like bouncing off the meaning of words. like the origins of words, not the meaning, the origins, where it comes from.
Yeah.
And so like it's a private definition. And I think that's really important to have, is private definitions that matter for yourself. And then providing, when it comes to sharing your thoughts, something that I'm really being incredibly conscious as I move back into content creation heavily, is always providing as much context as possible. My own context of my meaning of what I'm saying, what I mean. Because truth be told, it's always going to be different. Even if you have people that connect on a similar level, like I'm very intrigued to see the results of us, because you and I think in similar ways, but we have very different like contexts.
Oh yeah.
So I'm really intrigued at how we both perceive the word we're going to do today, because we think similarly but different enough to affect.
Oh, there's certainly going to be a difference. And what I want to add to what you said is, yes, there is a definition that we could formulate, but it's moving, it's evolving. It's not a conclusion where you go, okay, yep, we've done that, move on. It's continuous, like science. Science is continuous. You can't suddenly just go, yep, we found the answer, next thing, because there's going to be a context, as you mentioned, there's going to be a context that potentially challenges, changes, or disproves whatever it is that you've said. So the definition, your meaning of something is going to adapt, mold, and change through what you know and what you learn. And I mean, I don't think believe is the appropriate word here, but I can't think of a better one at the moment. I believe in the Bayesian hypothesis of how your brain works, Bayesian theorem, then prior beliefs are going to shape whatever your new evolving working belief is, which means obviously anything new is also going to impact whatever your belief is. So new information can change that definition, which is kind of what we're not necessarily hoping to do later on, but like the ability just to have a look at what other people, what other individuals that are similar to you or just completely different to you see in a word. I think it could actually be an interesting exercise to do with students, or with, like, I say students meaning anyone looking to learn something, not just people in academics. Because when you do a lecture, or when you have a lesson, or when you watch a video, or you read a blog, everyone will have different things that stick at the top of their mind. I mean, when you do a course, an online course, you could do, someone could say something, just a couple of sentences, and you'll have 5 or 6 different interpretations of what was said. Just in one sentence. What's the whole course?
And there's so much to touch into the learning side, especially for business, like people who are doing workshops and online courses as a business owner. Like that's a fantastic way of interacting with your people taking the course or doing the workshops. In a workshop I recently just did for a group in South Africa, I actually asked the question, what does systems mean to you? What is it? And systems is a fucking heavy word. Like it is a really, really heavy word that is rooted in, for many people, deep-seated feelings of like, there's something wrong with me. I need to be fixed. And so one thing that I did in that workshop, where I kind of, it's introduction to me and my work, is dissecting that. Like what a system means, what context, what the definition is in this context. And I think having more contextual definitions, oh, that's a word I like right now. Having more contextual definitions is so much more important from a learning standpoint, from an understanding, and from a making sure we're all on the similar page in terms of what we're learning.
I don't want to expand too much on systems because I know it's a word that we're probably going to have a look at. It's one of the words on our list, so I don't want to expand too much on that. But when you said sort of like similar brain processing, basically, like similar wavelength of explaining something, it's useful when not only communicating with people, but also when trying to find a solution to a problem. There are so many examples I can think of in both sport and the academic world that I've been involved in, where there's been an issue, there's been a problem, and the solution has taken so long to find because people don't understand the problem the same way, i.e. they have a different meaning of the problem. and a lot of the time it's like the lecturer doesn't see the problem in what the student's finding. And I'm going to relate this to parenting as well. Sometimes when I look at some of the parents of individuals that I've coached, like younger individuals, the parents have a completely different understanding of what the session means to them.
I love how the non-parent is talking about parenting.
It's because when you coach trampoline, the parents are always sharing their opinions, irrespective of whether they've done trampoline before or not.
Yeah, as a parent, I completely agree. And yeah, it's very and even let's stay on the parenting thing, because I am a parent. Yay! Like the context of a conversation between your child and you can very much. It's so interesting seeing the different perceptions. So I have, for context, if people don't know, I have twins, and they are incredibly the opposite. They are exactly the opposite. They are not the same in any way, shape, or form. They don't think the same. They work completely differently.
Apart from like biology, they're kind of similar.
They're born on the same day. That's where pretty much the differences end.
Okay.
Well, they weren't actually born on. They're born on the same day, but 30 minutes ahead. One was 30 minutes later. So but like the way that they think is very different, and it's fascinating holding a conversation with one child who is the same age. They are the exact same age, talking to
30 minutes.
Talking to my son, and then talking to my daughter about pretty much the same thing, and the needs of that, like the conversation, like what that means to them is very, very different. And so you have to think about their context when you're talking to them and how to shift the context so that you're thinking like them, so that you can connect with them and understand, and then they can understand you as well. Instead of this, like, I'm the parent, you learn this way, that is that. When you connect with your child and connect with their context and their understanding, it's so cool. It's coming into their world for just a short amount of time. It is amazing.
Something I want to expand on as well. I know understanding is another one of our words, but when you said understand there, my immediate thinking is that when you're younger, obviously there are certain elements of knowledge, expertise, experience, intelligence, whatever word you want to put in there. We're at different levels. We're at different levels, and I think, is it Jubilee or Wired, whatever YouTube channel it is, that's done like expert explains things to 5 different people. It's like
Wired, I think it is.
Yeah, I think it was Wired.
Either Wired or Insider. Did Insider?
It might be Insider. I'm not sure. But anyway, they basically do a video where an expert, or so-called expert, explains a topic in 5 different levels. Typically it's done through age rather than intelligence, because they'll pick a 9-10-year-old and someone at, I think it's like college or high school and then college, I'm not sure, and then they pick someone studying it and then someone actually researching it. And when you're having a conversation with people about a topic that has a different level of understanding to you, the meaning of a word is going to be drastically different because someone's understanding is different. And if your understanding is increased, you're going to be able to imagine different scenarios, which the other person may not be able to do, which therefore means you're assuming they know something. And if you make assumptions, it can make an arse out of you and me. Sorry, I had to put that in there.
I also want to kind of like piggyback off of that a little bit in terms of client work. When you're working with clients, there's a whole thing around how uncomfortable setting boundaries are with your clients. And I struggled with it for years. But like the shift that I've kind of figured out is boundaries are just context. It's just context for your client. It's like, hey, these things probably will happen. I'll miss a couple of things. I'll probably do this. Sometimes I'll forget. Just buzz me and let me know. Like, my kid may need me more than you, and I'm going to cut off a call like literally at the beginning. If I'm ill, tough. Like, if you have those conversations, and they are terrifying conversations with a brand new client, but it was so. I started having these conversations recently with with newer clients and past clients, and the response has been overwhelmingly positive. It's like, oh my gosh, that's so amazing! Like, thank you for saying that. I now understand how our relationship works, what the expectations are. It's like having it all up front, the context and meaning up front, is the best possible thing you can do for your clients. Like when you work with people, having that understanding of, hey, I work like this. My expectations of you are this. This is what you should expect of me. This means we can achieve this. And it's like, and one part of what I say to every single one of my clients is, I am not a mind reader. I don't know everything. I am going to get things wrong. There is no hard and fast rule in business, and I will probably get it wrong sometimes. Now, obviously, you know that on a subconscious level to some degree that that the person you're talking to doesn't know everything. But by saying that, when things inevitably go wrong, because frankly, business is not an exact science, I suppose neither is performance either. It's not an exact science. There are so many variables.
It's social science.
Yeah, it's a social science, and the same with coaching and consulting and all of that stuff. It's like things will go wrong. I will screw up. You will screw up. It's okay. We're human.
Yep.
And I think having that conversation up front is like it's the meaning of of the relationship. It's the intention. Meaning. The word meaning is mean, the original kind of verb of like meaning, intend, have in mind, common, general, a sense of, an understanding. We're all on the same page. Oh, so exciting. I love words.
Yes. You brought up a word in there that I want to emphasize, which was expectations.
Yes.
Building expectations. I did that a while ago now on my website. When you go to the contact me page, there is expectations of what you can expect. I check my email once a day. If you haven't sent an email on that check, I won't respond to you, because I'm not going to check my emails to see if I've got a load of messages. And when I am talking with someone in a meeting or whatever, or just having a conversation, there are expectations that I either say explicitly, we will not do this, or I will not do that, or this is how this conversation will go, or it's going to end at this point. But then there are also expectations that I have, which I don't say, but I can either make explicit or I just don't say. And when you don't give expectations to other people, the meaning of that context, that environment, is different because of the expectations and the differing expectations. And when working with clients or working with individuals, just working with anyone really, whether you're an academic in sports, in business, or playing tiddlywinks, it's expected.
I don't know why you chose tiddlywinks. I love that word. Don't know why. Absolutely love that word, tiddlywinks. Don't know why.
Oh, it's a great game. But yeah, it's like if your expectations are different, the meaning of the context, the meaning of the environment is going to change. And if the meaning changes, the perception of actions, how people behave, is going to also change. And that's how you can either escalate or de-escalate an environment. Something I want to riff on a little bit. So this is an example from actually last week's football game. The referee came from Devon. So he's moved over to Eastbourne, which is where I live in the UK. So he's basically gone southwest to southeast. And he said that it was the worst game that he's reffed ever, because of how violent was the word he used, but we weren't violent, as in like not my team, the other team were supposedly violent towards him, and they weren't. It's the way he was speaking and the way he was trying to communicate with them was so different to everyone from local that he was causing them to get irritated and aggravated because of the way he was communicating to them. Yeah.
Now I'm interested. We've got to. I am from Devon. Now I'm intrigued. Like, how was he communicating?
It was quite abrupt. Very to the point. Very, very to the point. And he didn't take any disagreements, which as a referee, you're expected to, like, people are going to disagree with your decisions. But he didn't take any of it at all, which as a referee in Southeast, you just take it. If you don't take it, you're going to cause friction. You're going to cause arguments. People are not going to be happy with you, especially as a lot of the decisions he were making were poor. And like everyone on the field and off the field was like, what is he doing? And he didn't manage the situation because the expectations he had of our actions were completely different to everyone else on the field, which just triggered the environment. And at the end of the game, he didn't change his expectations, his perceptions. He didn't change the meaning of the environment at all to the different place in the country he happened to be in. And a perfect example of when this got a little bit out of hand was, for some odd reason, in amateur football in the UK, blue cards are a thing, which are basically a 5-minute or 10-minute sin bin. So instead of getting a yellow card, you get a blue card. But he didn't have a blue card, so he was using a yellow card as a substitute for a blue card, right? But then he gave someone a blue card. They went off. It's sort of known with the amateur teams that you sort of know you go off, but no one knows that you have to bring the same player back on. It's not a rule anyone ever looks at, because no one gets blue cards. It doesn't happen. So a different player came on because the player that went off was actually injured, so he didn't come back on. So they brought another player on, but the referee immediately blue carded that player because it was a new player. But no one knew the rule. No one on either team knew the rule. No one on the sidelines knew the rule. Only the ref did. And he carried on with it. And the environment's already toxic. So you're thinking to yourself, okay, you've built a toxic environment from your expectations. The meaning of the game is completely different for you to everyone else here on this field today. And you're now enforcing a rule that only you know about. A little bit of an odd way to go about it, but of course it triggered a lot of friction, especially in the opposing team, because they were then down like 20 minutes. They were down to 10 men for 20 minutes. And it's just the change of expectation, the change of perception, the change of meaning of the environment, not necessarily the word, the environment to that person, drastically changes how actions are done.
I love this conversation. And yes, Devonshire people are very much like to the bloody point.
It's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, a lot of people in the UK, just in general, are very to the point. It's just, as a referee in football, different places referee in different ways. And there is an expectation in the Southeast that a referee is to be respected, and they are respectful because, very similar to a rugby referee, that's how you're treated in the Southeast of the UK. Like, you are a referee, you're not necessarily like a sir like you would be in rugby, but you are respected. Not respected as much as you should be, but you're still respected. But this person from Devon just treated it as if he was refereeing like his mates, but none of us knew him. And yeah, I don't think he was expecting the responses that he got.
That's so fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many examples I could give, with not just in football, in handball as well, because handball is an international sport, not very popular in the UK. So you get a lot of European players, French, Portuguese, Spanish, Italian, Hungarian, like all of them coming over. Like when I played handball for my local team, I was the only English person. We had 17 players. I was the only English person in this English team. They were all from, I think we had 2 from Portugal. Everyone else was from a different country. They all spoke, like most of them spoke 3 languages, 4 languages. They're swearing in English, but saying everything else in whatever language they speak in. Some of them know the referees because the referee will turn up. Oh, we've got Hungarian ref. Who can speak Hungarian? We got 3 players. Okay, how many have you got? And the other team's got like 4 players or 1. It was very much a language mismatch. The expectations for every single person there was drastically different because of the cultures, and the cultures changed the meaning.
Oh, it's so good. This is just a beautiful. Meanings are in people, not words.
Yep.
It sums it up delightfully, beautifully.
It encompasses so many aspects of communication, and there is a lot of them.
Oh yeah, absolutely. 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 This is so fascinating. This is fun. I have a feeling we have smoothly rounded off this conversation.
Yes, that's what I was thinking.
Get to the freaking point now, which is the bit that both of us have been sat here going, come on. Well, I have been anyway. I don't know about you, but yeah. So
yeah, I'm going to open up truth. So how do we want to, actually, do you want to explain what we're going through first? Because
yeah,
I just did a bit of a rant about sports. So
this is a new kind of section of the Notion Nerds podcast. We are absolute PPs, professional podcasters, if you have not heard that term before. And so we now have sections in our in this wonderful podcast where we talk about kind of the meaning of the word of a word from each of our different contexts. We talk about what it means to us, how that figures for us, and then we both, so neither one of us have seen what the other person is saying. We made a series of notes, sometimes up to 5, maybe 10, maybe fucking hundreds, depending on how much time we had.
We started with 5 because it was a nice, easy round number.
I managed to just about keep it around 5-ish, but yeah, I was I'm going to be doing a whole thing on this now because it was very fascinating. But it's a way of two people who have, I suppose, similar perspectives discussing this in a way that to open the conversation on what these words mean to us, and also to you guys who are listening. What does this word mean to you? And to open up the discussion around these words, because as we have discussed in this episode, meanings are very different and they are the people.
Something I'm going to quickly clarify as well is I do want to give a quick small shout out to Vera, who I brought this topic up a while ago with John, and Vera just gave me the topic again. I was like, okay, if someone that listens to the podcast also had this idea, it sounds like a good idea. And what we've done, or what I've done, which I suggested to John, is we've got 5 bullet points each. And I've prioritized mine top to bottom. That may change as we go through. But it basically gives us an idea of our initial thoughts. So when the word truth comes to mind, our first bullet points are the initial thoughts that come to us with the word truth. Now, we could have come up with the same point, but John may have prioritized it as 4. I may have prioritized it as 1. Or I could have completely different points to John, completely total different points. I haven't looked at his page. I don't know what it is. And what I think we'll probably do is go backwards and forwards. So we'll do the first point, then the second point, then the third point. So we've got a little bit of balance in there. So truth, who wants to go first? Well, considering you've been sitting there waiting, do you want to go first?
Yeah, why not? Why not? So the thing that I put right at the top is where the word truth comes from. So for me, finding the meaning of the word is really important because that helps to understand where it comes from. So I'm actually going to bring up the meaning of the word as well, but I made a note, and the note was having or characterized by good faith, which comes from the Proto-Germanic of having or characterized by good faith. For me, that captured my instant attention on faith. Now, my first point is literally that description. I have notes on that description, so I don't know whether you want to pass it over. We're still exploring this, but I'm gonna talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I was gonna say you go on that a little bit because that's completely different from my first point.
Oh, I love this. And so, for context, I grew up in a Christian family, so faith is a fascinating thing for me. I am no longer. I am atheist. So there's my putting that out there. But faith and faithfulness, I honestly believe that truth and faith are basically the same thing. It's having a belief in what you think. Your truths are yours. There is no big, massive truth. There are no truths. It is a perception. Truth is just a perception. Pausing there before I go right on to that. Do you know what? What I'm thinking, why don't we just go through the whole conversation? Because all of my thoughts interlink. I don't know whether yours do, but my thoughts are all very interlinked.
So that point can tie in with one of mine. So my first point was proven facts and laws. Because when I think of truth, the gold standard of truth would be facts and laws, mostly looking at the natural sciences, because to build beliefs and perceptions around things requires some semi-stable understanding of what a fact is, i.e., sorry, flat earthers, but the world is spherical. And that is a fact, that is a law, and you can build assumptions and perceptions from that. So that's why I put facts and laws right at the top, because at the end of the day, they don't change often. And when they do change, it's either a very, very small, nuanced contextual change or a drastic, yeah, we were just completely wrong change.
So so this is fascinating. I like this. Like laws are very I understand the facts, like factual things that actually have empirical evidence. But laws, that one is fascinating to me. I don't agree with your laws as a fact. They are not a fact because all laws are different depending on where you are. And some laws we still just look at UK law, for goodness sake. Like,
okay, so I mean, this is meaning and words inside the section. So when I said laws, I'm thinking laws of motion. Laws of motion. I didn't want to say theories because theories encompasses like everything. So because facts are almost cemented, but then there are laws that can't necessarily be proven due to limits in collection of data or management of something. So Einstein, like laws of relativity or theory of relativity, physics laws, they can't necessarily be disproven because we don't have equipment to disprove it or things like that. That's where I went with it.
So one of my points: truth is a perception, not a fact, but is often treated like fact. Truth is a perception, not a fact, but is often treated like fact. And so what I mean by that is, even though we have these kind of like, the earth is round, that is a fact. That is something that is empirically backed up by evidence. But that evidence is open to interpretation. Hence why we have people who are flat earthers, who believe the earth is flat, even though the evidence countermands that. The thing is that to them, the earth is flat, and they have empirical evidence as far as they're concerned. Yes, we can disprove it, of course, but it still feels like facts to them. So for me, I think truth is a perception, either a perception of a fact, or is just a perception of their viewpoints, of their meaning, of how they work. There are multiple truths and not many real truths. It's a pledge to yourself. It's an agreement with yourself. This is a fact to me. And we very, yeah, go on. I'll let you.
This is a fact to me. I don't think I agree with what you're saying to an extent, as in like a truth is individualized. It's actually kind of one of my points later on. Truth is individualized, but I don't think truth is a fact to someone. A fact is a fact. A truth is truth. So I don't think you can change a fact, but the truth for
I think you can. Like, facts change.
1 add 1 equals 2.
Well, that depends, because I'm going to be pedantic here, but 1 + 1 can also look like a window. There's a joke there, but it's a perception. It's okay. I'm gonna go. It's a perception of a fact. Maybe that's better. Like, truth is a perception of a fact.
I would say interpretation would be a better adjective, because it's an interpretation of the context around a piece of information, i.e. the fact. Because like the 1 add 1 mathematically, i.e. in a mathematics context, putting it into a calculation is 2. But if you change the narrative, the context around it, and what does it make, you change the calculation to make. It's now a what?
I just looked up fact, because we're both hitting on the word fact.
Mm-hmm.
But the perception, I think fact is a word we need to dive into. So interestingly, which I was not actually expecting, fact actually comes from the word of action and anything done, which is very interesting. Now, the main modern sense of thing known to be true, or something that has actually occurred, is what is the more modern sense. But the original word fact comes from the Latin factum, an event, occurrence, deed, or achievement. So that's interesting. So I think our two viewpoints of fact are, I'm in the 1530s. You're kind of more modern. Why am I not surprised? You're from the 1630s. It's interesting. So honestly, that is, Oh, and feat is another earlier adoption of the same word in French. Fact, real state of things, as in distinguished from a statement of belief. Which is, that's really fascinating. And I'm trying not to dive into fact because I'm like, ooh, let's eat this up and chew it and enjoy it.
So have you done your first 2 points?
I've pretty much done most of my points. Like most of my points kind of like I have an overarching thinking of it.
Mhm.
The final point I kind of have is like it's a pledge. It's an agreement you've made with yourself. If we go back to the definition, like the not necessarily definition, but like the original like meaning
Etymology.
of the word, its etymology of truth. I'm gonna get it back up again because I kind of got a bit excited there. It's a sense of something that is true. It's accuracy, correctness, speaking the truth. That it's a belief. I think truth stems from belief.
Yeah, so my second point, so my first point being proven facts and laws of the world. My second point was formulated opinions using synthesis and critique, interpreting statistical information. I added statistical information specifically for research purposes. But when I say statistical information, it doesn't have to be academic papers or studies. It can just be things that you know that could be put into probability, which is therefore stats. So the formulated opinions would be your beliefs, your ideals, what you know from prior beliefs, prior knowledge, prior experiences, and formulating those ideally with the most unbiased view possible, but so that you can create an opinion using critique that either agrees with your opinion or disagrees with your opinion to move this narrative forwards, which is something I expanded on earlier.
It's fascinating.
Like Bayes' theorem, basically, it's just like the new piece of information would then be used to either support or critique your current belief. Not necessarily change, because just because something disagrees with what you think is true doesn't mean it's going to change it.
I think now this wasn't an original point, but I think we both kind of truth is flexible. It's not hard and fast. Is that one of your points?
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, like that's where my brain is like truth isn't it's not a hard fact. It's not a rule. Truth and rule are not the same thing. Like they are different. Truth is flexible. It changes. It's ever moving, ever changing. Your truth will change based on your faith or your loyalty to a belief. That's one of my points. A loyalty to a belief you have. That is what a truth is. It's a loyalty to a belief you have. If you believe, going back to our flat earth kind of conversation, if you believe that the earth is flat, you have a loyalty to that belief. It is a truth for you. Even if empirical evidence says otherwise, which it does, as far as they are concerned, empirical evidence shows the exact opposite.
I mean,
and I think
I'm gonna skip my third point and go to the fourth one because it ties in with that. Various narratives and perspectives can change or alter the truth, which is exactly that. Like the truth that you have can be altered and changed, like I mentioned earlier about beliefs, but it can be changed by the narrative and perspective of either you or other people around you, because our perception of something, our belief, our truth about something can drastically change, especially when we're newly introduced to something and it isn't cemented as a belief. It is something new to you. You will change your truth multiple times when you're finding things out at the beginning of research, or like now. what is truth? Like I don't know about you, but I'm like, oh, that's an interesting point, and I'm using all the pieces of information as different ways to think about the same thing.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I think we can tie this beautifully back to the title of this podcast, The Notion Nerds. Our truth changed.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's like as we learned more and more about ourselves and how we worked, we realized that Notion wasn't and couldn't do everything we needed. Our truth and perception of like we had a loyalty to an app. Many people have a loyalty to an app when they first start. It's like, Notion helped me figure out how my brain works. That's amazing. I love it. However, my truth changed when I discovered there are things that I needed that Notion couldn't provide.
Yes. So my last point was truth to one person can be different to another, which we've sort of gone over. But something that I kind of want to alter that slightly is that a truth is not the same as the truth.
Mm.
Because you said a truth, and I was like, a truth and the truth, even though it's just a word in front of the word we're talking about, it drastically changes the context of what you're talking about. So a truth to you can be a different from a truth to someone else, but the truth could be agreeing or disagreeing with both of the truths that you've gone through, because they're different perceptions of a belief or interpretations of factual errors.
Exactly what I was saying. It is. It's a perception of a belief. It is a strong loyalty to that belief. And like the real truth, what does that even mean? It's a perspective. I genuinely think that truth is a perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And even when we go back to your first point of like, there are certain truths that are, E equals MC squared. There are people who don't believe that. And so does that mean they're wrong? Or is it just that their perception is different? And what are they seeing that's different? It's a fascinating...
Wrong.
Oh, that's a word.
Wrong. Like,
yeah, that's a word. I mean, I looked up, because we're talking about truth. I'm flipping it. Lie, speak falsely, tell an untruth for the purpose of misleading.
Untruth.
I know, right? That's what caught me. I was like, oh, untruth. What the hell does that mean?
You're being untruth to me.
You're being untruthful.
Untrustworthy.
Oh,
Is that? Yeah, you're untrustworthy. Yeah, that sounds...
I just looked up untruth because it's an old English word and it comes from unfaithfulness. So linking back to the fact that
faith, belief.
Faith and belief. It's sorry.
Yeah. So
damn.
I guess the question now is, where do we go with that? What changes with the reflection? Reflection takes a while, but what are your initial thoughts around truth now that we've sort of done that little dive? Were you expecting my points to be what they were?
Not fully. I was expecting the kind of truth is, I knew you were going to go the more science route. I knew that was coming. I had a feeling that's where you were going to start. And I think part of what, like, that point is there is a truth to that, but my perspective of that is shifting slightly, that there are some things that we universally hold as true. But I still think that's an acceptance of faith in those ideas, faith in the society that we have been born into, and the understanding that, gravity is this, this is that, this is a fact, this is something that is, and it's empirical evidence is a word that I'm like, I'm viewing that differently now, like evidence, because evidence, what actually is that? That needs to be a word we add on there, because evidence affects our truth.
Within reason, because...
Well, it can affect our truth, but...
because evidence is can obviously be manipulated. And p-hacking is something that I've spoken about on my podcast, which is just really annoying, but it's something that happens in academics because of the way academics currently works. And for those that are unfamiliar, p-hacking, I think, did I speak about p-hacking on this podcast as well?
No, we did it right at the end and you didn't mention
all right. So p-hacking is essentially where statistical testing in academic research is manipulated to find a significant difference, a significant change, a p-value, just by essentially brute forcing your way to something that is significant, which some people do unintentionally, some people do it intentionally, and they come out with statistical differences that aren't true because of manipulation of data.
This is the point I made in my Obsidian, which I just come to my mind. So it was before our conversation of like, people believe a common belief is that if you put the phrase studies show that it's an empirical truth.
Yeah, nah.
When it's not, it's a perception. It is a viewpoint. And that's all studies are. They are a perspective and a viewpoint. Or if it's kind of like, peer-reviewed studies, and it's like a perspective and viewpoint of multiple people. It is not a truth.
Peer-reviewed isn't multiple people, or doesn't have to be multiple people. I mean, that's why meta-analysis are kind of like the gold standard for research, because it's taking multiple research studies with various individuals and then coming to a conclusion with that. But even in meta-analysis, you've got the bias of the authors.
Which will never go.
No, you can never get rid of the bias, which is why social science is so difficult for people to accept. Isn't the right word, but acknowledge, because it is so, you need to trust in someone's perception of facts, of their interpretation of stats, and did they do this ethically. It's very difficult. One of my points on here, can it be disproved? It's very difficult to disprove or prove a lot of things in social science, and even in medical science, because of the multifaceted interactions of the body, the way the mind and body works, and everything else involved. Because it's very hard to isolate all of those things to make it a causal relation or correlational relation, which is what I spoke about in a video of mine recently. So finding a truth in science is very difficult.
Yeah.
Because science is the opposite of faith and belief, yet truth is a perception of belief and faith. So you're fighting against one another.
Yeah, well, it's an entire, like, I can't think of the word I'm looking for. The word is there. A paradox.
Yeah, I think the fact that we have truths in science and truths in ourselves, in faith and belief, shows that truth is obviously a very diverse word. It's kind of like a phenomenological word. I like the word, where there isn't an absolute definition, because there are so many interpretations of the words, very similar to fatigue, tired, sleepy, and understanding, knowledge, expert. They're all phenomenological words.
That's why we've chosen a lot of these words, because they don't have a simple answer. There's not one way of viewing a truth. There is not one way of viewing anything.
There's no truth in the meaning behind the word truth.
Absolutely. Well, there is, because it's a belief. It's a faith in, it's loyalty to a belief.
There are multiple truths.
Yeah, but that's actually one of my points. Yeah. There are multiple truths and not many real ones, because every single truth can be countermanded.
Not many real ones. How do you know if it's real?
Well, yeah.
It's real to me.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not many kind of universally accepted truths. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, that's one of those terms used in academics when they do a lit review or an introduction. They're like, there is no universal definition of this word.
Yeah, there is no universal definition of truth. It's all perception. Truth.
A lot of it is perception. Yeah. So I quite enjoyed that. I quite like that. And moving forwards for me with that is just being aware of when I'm using truth and potentially substituting truth for fact or belief where appropriate. Yeah,
likewise. I think I often say the truth is, but it's not. I've been very aware of that word anyway. Like my truth is, that's something that I'm going to try and shift, trying to avoid using the truth, instead changing it to my truth.
A very small change, and for those where English is your second, third, or potentially fourth or more language, it's one of those things in grammatical English where I have found that some people in the UK that are like only speak English leave out a lot of the nuances in grammar and what words to use. But then in the same sense, there are people that have English as a second or third language and they speak it far better than natives. Uh,
I think it's far better. I think it's more like they're more deliberate with it.
yeah, I would say that's better with using language because you can better communicate the point you're trying to put across. And I think these small nuance changes to how you speak helps with communication, but I'm not sure how it will help. That's something I'm not sure how you would measure, because essentially when you talk, when you say anything, when you use a word, it's down to the individual's perception of the word that you're using.
You the way you would measure it is by the reaction, how people respond. It's not something you can.
Do they respond in the way that you expected them to, or
Yeah.
the way that you wanted them to?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So let us
Yeah.
know. We would really like to, and we're going to keep hammering on this. What does truth mean to you? I think I was about to say, which viewpoint do you believe in more? But we kind of both agreed with each other, but not at the same time. It was really interesting.
Yeah, I think that's going to be consistent though, because everyone fundamentally has a similar idea of when and how to use truth, but it's the small nuances of what it really means, i.e., what we've talked about in the episode, that will make the changes and will potentially change when you use the word or when you apply the word to something.
Yeah, I definitely think after this conversation, I'm more aware of what actually truth means and my perception of that and that faith in my own belief.
Hmm.
It's
Yeah,
going to be.
I am also an atheist for those curious.
Yes, yeah. It's. I think that's kind of fun. I would actually be very interested to hear from someone who is pardon me, a member of a religion. I would be intrigued to hear what they view truth and belief, whether they view that as the same thing. I would be very intrigued to someone who does have a structured belief system. I'll call it that rather than religion, because religion is heavy. But like,
Yeah. I was thinking the same thing when you brought up belief, because my initial thinking, if we were to do belief, is religion would be one of the religion and faith being the first things that come to mind when it comes to belief. But I know through science that belief is more than that. So yeah, belief is another one of those words that you're like, what?
Yeah. Thank you very much for joining us for this episode. It has been a pleasure as always. And we shall see you next week.